You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast, Episode 10. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is a very special episode. I have been looking forward to this episode from the beginning. This is actually my favorite episode, and I am so excited to be doing our first Ask the Coach, also known as the Dear Tami episode. This is where I get to answer your questions. This is where you send in questions and I answer them live here on the podcast. We've had a bunch of really great questions that have come in. And if you've sent in questions, whether it's been on the Facebook page or by email or at fibromyalgiapodcast.com, thank you so much. I love your questions and I love answering them. If you have questions and you want to send something in, by all means, please do. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com and under the contact menu, you'll see the Ask Coach option. You can send us your question. You won't have to wait. We will send you your question anyway. This particular question is one that came in fairly recently, but it's one that I get asked a lot. So I went ahead and chose it. But if you send in a question, you won't have to wait. We will get you an answer, even if we choose to do it live on the show. So this question, and I'm going to leave this anonymous just in case, but I will still read it to you so that you get the gist of her message. She says, first of all, I really want to thank you for the podcast. You give me a massive amount of hope and strength to never give up, no matter what. Thank you. That means a lot to me. I love it. Then she goes on to say, with her question, I am a young woman with fibromyalgia. I'm also a student. My question is about weather changes. If I'm in a windy place for just a few minutes, it leads to so much pain for days. Also, normal room temperatures is not normal for me. Whenever I sit in a class, listen to a lesson or a lecture, I feel cold and that starts to cause more body pain. I've tried dressing warmly, especially in layers, but it just didn't work for me. What would you recommend in this case? So first, thank you so much for your question. There's actually 2 or 3 in here, so we'll do our best to answer all of them. And let's start with the question about the weather and whether or not weather affects fibromyalgia or not. Before doing this episode, I just did a quick Google search. And if you guys aren't familiar with Google Scholar, it's a great place to look up research. So just go out there, type in scholar.google.com. And don't worry, I'll put a link in our show notes. You'll be able to find that at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/10, the number 10, and that will get you to our transcript and our show notes for today's episode. So just go to scholar.google.com and you can actually type in fibromyalgia and the word weather, and it'll pull up all of the studies related to fibromyalgia and weather. There were actually quite a lot, so I didn't look through all of them. I did go through the first, 5 or 6 or so and just take a quick glance at them. And the thing that I found interesting is that most of them actually looked at only a few components of the weather. As you know, with weather, like just being a person who lives on this planet, right? When we talk about weather, in quotes, we are talking about a lot of things. We're talking about whether it's rainy or dry, what the humidity is, if the sun is shining, if it's cloudy, what the temperature is. And along with it, there's things like barometric pressure changes. So when we say weather, in quotes, we're actually talking about a bunch of different stuff. And so these studies out there, some looked at more things than others. So there was one study that primarily looked at whether it was rainy or not. Did rain affect fibromyalgia? There was another study that looked at temperature. There was another study that looked at the barometric pressure. Some studies looked at, is the weather changing? Like, is the temperature dropping or is the temperature increasing? Others looked at humidity. So there was a lot of different things being looked at. And what I found the most interesting, and you can see there's a couple studies out there, I'll link to them in the show notes, but there's a couple studies that didn't just look at fibromyalgia, they looked at other conditions. So the one I'm thinking of in particular, it had fibromyalgia, it had rheumatoid arthritis, it had like healthy control subjects, so people who don't have any of these conditions. And then they looked at the weather. And what was super interesting to me is that the groups had different responses. So people without any conditions, the healthy controls, weather didn't affect them at all. Like they didn't feel better or worse no matter what was going on around them. Fibromyalgia, we were affected more by barometric pressure and a couple other things. But barometric pressure specifically, which is what I think that we're affected the most by. And then the people with rheumatoid arthritis were affected by different things. They weren't the same things that affected fibromyalgia, which I think is super interesting because it's not just a matter of the weather affecting pain, it's literally affecting our bodies in different ways, which affects our symptoms in different ways. So when it comes to weather and fibromyalgia, there was actually a pretty popular study that came out a few years ago that very definitively said, at least from them and in the, you know, the journalists, that's the word I was thinking of, the journalists, the way they reported on this particular study, they were basically saying this definitively proves weather does not affect fibromyalgia. And that particular study was not looking at barometric pressure. It was looking at whether it's rainy or sunny, you know, what the weather report that you would get like watching the weatherman on TV. You know, it's going to be partly cloudy with a chance of rain. That kind of weather was all that they were looking at. And that did not affect fibromyalgia. At the same time, you could ask any fibromyalgia person on the planet, do you think weather affects fibromyalgia? And you are most likely going to get a very definitive yes. Yes, weather affects me. So anecdotally, we know as patients, there is something about the weather that affects us. But this one particular study only looked at, you know, is it rainy? Is it cloudy? Is it, you know, chance of rain? And that did not affect us. And I think that that is because it's barometric pressure that affects us the most. I have seen this in my own life, and I've seen this in my clients, where the change in pressure is actually the thing that affects us the most. So it doesn't matter whether the barometric pressure is high or if it's low. The problem is when it changes, when it goes from high to low or from low to high. I had one client that every evening when the barometric pressure changed, her pain increased. For me, my migraines are definitely worse during the fall and during the spring when there's a lot more barometric pressure changes as the weather's a little bit more volatile. I'm like, just like be one, be the other. I don't care. Like, let's not switch back and forth because that's what hurts. I've got clients who are in other areas of the country where the weather is kind of volatile all the time, where there's a lot of windstorms that come through. And I've even had clients who have purposefully moved to a different part of the country so that they could feel better. And, you know, your life, how you feel is so important. You only get one, right? You only get one life. And you might as well do what you can to be able to live that life the best way possible. So, you know, you might need to consider moving if the weather in your area is keeping you from living your best life. I've also had people move because of the temperature. I don't tolerate heat very well. I've got other good friends who love the sun, love the heat, and don't tolerate cold very well, which is what this listener sounds like, you know, that she gets cold and then her body pain is higher. And the problem with getting cold that you don't have so much when you get hot is when you get cold, your muscles tense up. Like it's a natural physiological response that happens. Your muscles tense up to, you know, create warmth. And as soon as your muscles tense up with fibromyalgia, it's like we kick over into this mode where more tension leads to more tension. More clenching of your muscles leads to even more clenching of your muscles. And it's even harder for us to relax. So, what I've noticed with my clients who are extra sensitive to cold is that it is super important to not get cold. So, if you can do anything about it, whether it's wearing gloves or wool socks, or for a long time, I actually wore um, thermal underwear all the time, like top and bottom, all year round for a while. You can get like wool leggings and tank tops. I used to wear the silk ones because they didn't take up very much space. They weren't bulky, and my clothes laid nice over the top of them. But I had I had long underwear underneath all the time, keeping me warm. The other things that you can do is choose the fabrics in your clothes differently, like cashmere. I know it's expensive, you guys, but I tell you what, that stuff is nice and cozy. Or wool is also very warm. A lot of people don't like wool because it's scratchy. That's where I used to wear my silk undergarments, my silk thermal underwear underneath my wool sweaters. So I would have like a tank or a crew neck shirt, silk undergarment underneath. It's knit. It's not silk like shiny like, you know, sexy underwear. It's knit. It just happens to be made out of silk fibers instead of cotton fibers. But I would wear that because it's nice and smooth and not itchy. So I would put that on, and then I'd put my wool sweater over the top. You notice I'm wearing a turtleneck here if you're watching this on video today, just to be a little bit warmer with a sweater. Layering is really good, but looking at what materials your clothes are made of can really help with whether it's warmer or not. So again, things like cashmere, wool, those are actually the warmest. Silk is also warm. I know I'm talking about things that sometimes are expensive, but they don't have to be. Where you get them, the quality. I actually have a couple of wool sweaters that I have probably had for 20 years, seriously, that are still going strong and look great. So depending on, you know, how much you spend and the care you take with them, but also layering the right kinds of fabrics together, it can be really great. So that is a big one. The other thing that you may have to do, because I know this listener already talked about layering, so I would look at what the materials are, right? So what the clothes are made of. But the other thing you may have to do is actually use something that is warm to keep you warm. So that could be things like a heating pad, or it could be the thermacare patches that actually heat up, sticking to your body. You can get those. You can get little pocket hand warmers, like if you go to camping outlets, or if you have an outdoor store where you live, you can buy these thermal packets that you can carry around in your pockets to go, that don't need electricity or need to be heated up. It's actually a chemical reaction that creates the heat. Those can be super helpful to make sure you stay warm. things like drinking hot water or tea or coffee. Obviously, you have to be careful about the caffeine. Um, with your adrenals and with your pain levels. So you want to avoid caffeine if you can. But even just like hot water with lemon and honey, or herbal tea, like peppermint tea is actually what I drink the most, peppermint tea, ginger tea. Those can be really great ways, because that warm liquid is actually going in your belly and heating you up. Eating warm foods like soup, those can also keep you warmer. It's super important that you're getting enough calories for your body to burn to feel warm. So making sure that your body has what it needs. Getting enough sleep also helps your body regulate a little bit better. And like I said, you may actually need something warm if you're sitting in a cold classroom and you know it's going to trigger a flare up. It might be worth investing in some of those pocket warmers or thermocare patches. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention, you can also make your own heating pad that doesn't take electricity by putting some rice. So just like go to the store, buy a bag of uncooked, plain, like the cheapest kind you can find, rice grains, and then put them in a sew a little fabric envelope for them, however big you want. You basically make it's 4 seams to make a square. Put the rice in there, and then you just heat that little bag up in the microwave for a couple of minutes, and it stays warm for a while. So I will use this a lot as a hot pack around my neck. If my whole body is cold, I will put the rice bag on my belly. That's a secret place to heat your whole body up. If you put the heat on your core, put it on your belly, then your internal organs are warm enough, which tells your body, I can send that warm blood out to your extremities to keep you warm. So when you get cold, your blood starts to pool in the areas that are most important. It keeps the heat in the most important parts, right? So your brain and your internal organs, your midsection, your chest, your belly. So if you heat up your belly, that tells your body, I can send warmth out to the fingers now. We're not going to die. We can send warmth out to the fingers. Another trick, my dad taught me this. As a little girl, he always said, if your feet are cold, put on a hat. And it sounds funny, but it's 100% true because of what I was just saying, right? Like, you cannot live without your head. We are not going to let your head get too cold and like have your head fall off because of frostbite. Like, physiologically, that doesn't work. So our bodies are going to make sure that our brains stay the temperature they need to stay. We will lose fingers and toes and arms and legs before we allow our brains to get too cold. So if you put a hat on to help keep your head warm, then that tells your body we can send some of that heat out to fingers and toes and other parts of your body. So if you're not wearing a hat and you can wear a hat in class, I would absolutely do that. That will 100% help keep you warmer. And then you may even need to do, I was talking about wearing silk tank top underneath my sweaters. You can also get silk liners for your socks. They sell this in outdoor stores as well, like for people who go hiking, backpacking, things like that. You can get super thin silk socks that go on first, and then you put your wool socks on top of them. That actually helps keep you warmer. So hopefully those are some ideas there for you on how to keep warm when you're cold, but also why it is that you feel worse when you get cold. So if you find that in particular times of the year, particular buildings that you're in, like this person talking about getting cold in the classrooms. I have another client, when she works at certain places, she was ending up in a bit of a flare when she would work in those particular places, and we discovered it's because they're colder there. So she's got to make sure she stays warm enough in those particular buildings. So start being aware of when you're noticing a flare so that you can look and see, is it because I'm getting too cold? And what are the things that you can do to feel warmer? Can you layer? Can you use different materials in your clothing? Can you wear a hat? Can you wear, silk or wool or even flannel undergarments or whatever? Do you need to wear gloves? There's even gloves these days that allow you to use your phone and touch screens. You can get smart gloves that still allow you to use your touch devices, which are great. I have a pair and I have them in like my coat pockets. So anytime I put on my coat, my gloves are right there. Those things can also be super, super helpful. All right, you guys, keep sending in your questions. I love answering them. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/10, the number 10 for this episode. You can also go up in the contact menu while you're there, and you'll see the Ask the Coach option to be able to send in your questions. And as always, I am here to help in any way that I can. If you are interested in talking with a coach or exploring how a coach can help you feel better, there is a Find a Coach option on there. I've also got copies of my books out there for you to download to free. And you can always look at the episodes on fibromyalgiapodcast.com to see all of the past episodes, videos, transcripts, the whole 9 yards. All right, you guys. So that is it for our very first 10 episodes. Thank you so much for being here on this ride. We are in the process of planning the next 10 episodes. The 10th episode of each group is always going to be our little Dear Tami episode. And so you will find the next one at episode 20 when we get there. But the next few episodes, I've got a bunch of super fun stuff in the works. And I can't wait to share that with you. All right, you guys, have a great week until you hear from me again. And thanks so much for your support and your love. Bye.